Hello and welcome to LionWing Talks, a weekly show where we discuss all things LionWing, tabletop games, Japanese games, and localization. I'm your host, Bradley Hailstorm. I am also the founder and president of LionWing. This is episode 26 for July 28th, 2021. Hey, we announced the game yesterday. We'll talk about that here in a bit because I am particularly excited about our recent announcement. If you've followed along the journey of LionWing Talks, you probably know why I'm excited about this particular game. I'll talk about that during our project update section because we do have a format here and we try to follow the structure as closely as possible. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm about to explain what that structure is. And also, if this is your first time joining us, hey, thanks for checking us out. Much appreciated. If you're joining us in real time, even better, because then you get a chance to ask me questions in real time, which means I have no ability to prep for whatever you're going to ask me. So you're going to get an off-the-cuff answer, which tends to be my best answers anyway. Of course, if this is not your first time and you are a returning viewer, you are one of our veteran viewers. Welcome back, folks. Love having you here. Much appreciated showing up for it live. If you can't catch it live, though, I understand 9 p.m. ET isn't maybe the ideal time for everyone. So if you can't be with us live, then might as well catch it on playback, right? So you can do that the following day on Thursdays. We put the video up on YouTube, so you can check it out there. Tonight, we've got a lot of project updates. Like I said before, we follow a format. We'll go through our listener submitted questions first, then we'll go to our project updates, and then we're incorporating something that I started last week, which is where I just kind of spitball on some of the latest tabletop gaming news that is interesting to me. So we are going to be adding more elements to the show. This is just sort of like stage one of a format reset, I'm calling it now. So as we go through the weeks, we'll be adding in new segments. I'll talk about that toward the end of the show tonight. I want to get to questions so that ultimately I can get to our project updates because I have an update literally for every game. So that's always exciting. If you've been watching this show for any amount of time, you've probably noticed some weeks we only have updates for some games and not other games. But tonight I got an update for every game, which is always exciting. And it's good news all around. It's good news all around. So let me check the chat here. All right, haven't missed anything. Very good. I like to say that I love how you set up LionWing Talks this week with the little title structure you showed on Discord. Yeah, so if you are in Discord, you probably noticed that I also threw up kind of a primer for tonight's episode where I just gave you a quick sneak peek about what we're going to be going over tonight. It's kind of like a really straightforward docket of the highlights of what we'll be talking about. I'm going to try to do that every week. Now, that may not work every week because, again, if you were here last week, you know that I didn't get a chance to do anything until literally I hit the stream button. But I really am going to try to prep people about what we're going to cover in LionWing Talks before the show goes on the air. So I dropped something in the Discord this afternoon, probably 8 hours ago or so. I'm going to try to do that again. Af, I'm glad that was helpful for you. Okay. Oh snap! New hat. That's right. That's right. You know, with the reformatting of the show, I figured, well, I got to reformat myself a little bit, right? And so I was wearing a hat last week, which I think was the first time I've worn a hat on camera, and here I am with another hat this week. So there you have it. Also just saw there is an EU Testament update. Yes, there is. Yeah, that went out earlier this afternoon. Sin Theory in the chat, one of our community leads, said, I only recently, as in the last month, realized I like wearing hats. Yeah, Sin, so we're kind of in the same boat. It wasn't in the past month that I realized that I liked wearing hats, but it probably was about 2 years ago. So I was, I was pretty well into my 30s before I realized, like, hey, I like these things called hats. I have to be careful because while they say it's a myth that hat wearing can lead to early baldness, I really like them. And so I've got to balance my hat wearing with my perpetual fear of age catching up to my hairline. That is, when people ask all the time, like, what's your biggest fear in life? And people will say, like, oh, I'm afraid of clowns. I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of failure. No, I'm afraid of a receding hairline that is unrecoverable. So that's my biggest fear in life. So I like the hats because as I am getting older, my hairline is inching back a little bit. So that covers it up. And I also I just like the look of them, especially if you get a good hat, the right color, the right design. Can't just be any hat. I'm not a snapback person. I can't do snapbacks. I look like a fool. I'm envious of anyone that can wear the snapback. Because I see people all the time wear the snapback. I'm like, you look cool as fuck. I can't do that. I gotta wear a ball cap. Dark Soccer said, same. Like wearing hats now. Great for keeping the sun out of your face and staying cool. Yes, yeah, they're wonderful for the summertime for sure. Nothing beats pair of sunglasses and a hat while at the pool. That's been something I've been rocking lately. I wore winter jackets for about 5 years straight, says Fry Guy Fern. Like in the summertime, Fern? Because that sounds hot. That sounds really hot. I'm more, yeah. So Af said I'm more of a hood guy. Assassin's Creed might have a reason for that. I feel like you've said before, Af, that you're a hoodie person. I am a hoodie person too. I think I was wearing hoodies like well into May this year, and I'll probably start wearing hoodies in September. So I give myself like 3 months of no hoodies, but I just can't get away from them. I love them. They're comfy. They're comfy. Unfortunately, hoodies are so damn expensive, especially to get like a good one or to get like a custom printed one with something that you want on. It's like $50. I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? I just spent $50 on a hoodie? What is the world coming to? Anyway, so enough about that. Y'all didn't come here to hear me muse on clothing. You may have come here to hear me muse on games. So let's get to some questions. Let's get to some questions. LionWing Talks channel. We got some questions over here, so I'm going to bump over there right quick. Oh, what's going on in the general chat? Rogue just pumping that pumping that Twitch channel along with the featuring a new hat. Nice little caption there, Rogue. Thank you. Okay, so where did I last leave off? Dun, 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 dun. Okay. All right. So the first question, this came in last Thursday, so the day after the last LionWing Talk show, from the Martyr 781. May have been asked before, will we see the Embryo Machine expansions localized by LionWing? I don't know. As I've mentioned before, I have gotten this question before on a couple occasions actually, but I don't mind answering it again because it has been a while. I don't know what's going to happen there. So as I've said before, I really would love to localize the two Embryo Machine expansions that are out. There's Throne and Border, that's expansion 1, and then expansion 2 is called Gifted. Gifted's really cool. Gifted's really cool for a number of reasons. Each of the expansions have some amazing mech designs, by the way, like some really, really cool stuff. Just said OBS is disconnecting. That's never what you want to see. Anyway, OBS is a mystery to me sometimes. Yeah, it looks like we got DC'd for a moment. Sorry about that, but we kept recording. So I don't know what that's about. I'm hardlined in, which is very interesting that that we would have any stuttering, that we would have any DCs. Fortunately, so ever since we've lived in this house for 3 years, a little over 3 years. It's been trash internet since day one. I mean, just the absolute fucking worst internet I've ever had. Since I was like in my early 20s. So, I mean, like this is like real bad internet. Fortunately, we bought a new house and where we're going offers FiOps. So I will be glad to get rid of Spectrum. If anyone has Spectrum, you might know how terrible their internet is. Anyway, looks like we're good now. So that's fun. Nothing frustrates me more than random internet drops. So I apologize if I just went off the rails a little bit. So as I was saying, the expansions for Embryo Machine are really awesome. They're really, really cool. They have some of the coolest mech designs I've seen in any medium. And I'm not just talking about like board games. I'm talking about just across the board. Now you might be saying that's ridiculous. There's so many anime and games out there. How could you possibly say that these two random board games, these very niche random board games have the coolest mech designs you've seen? And I don't have an answer for you other than say they're some of the coolest mech designs I've ever seen. They're that good. Dayre is such a killer illustrator and has such high concepts when it comes to his mech designs that they're just sort of like next level stuff. But also, aside from the killer mech designs, the games sort of add on each time to the base game in really meaningful ways, which is always the best expansion, the best kind of expansion, in my opinion anyway. You can play the expansions alone or with the base game. But Gifted does something really cool where you actually use the game box to build the battlefield. So there's like it's a waterfall level, and the waterfall cascades down the side of the box into this lower elevation. It was very inventive, very cool stuff. So I would love to do something with those expansions, but the deciding factor is how well Embryo Machine does in the late pledges now, as well as how it does upon release. The Kickstarter was pretty successful, which is always a good thing, but a successful Kickstarter doesn't necessarily equate to a longer tail picture of the actual success of that published game. So you would think, though, that like if a game does well in Kickstarter, it's going to do well post Kickstarter through retail or wherever you're selling it, and that's just not always the case. And I don't know how Embryo Machine will shake out like that. I do know that we are going to be launching a post campaign, a post Kickstarter type of marketing campaign, which we have not done for any of our previous projects. So Embryo Machine will see a bit of a bump and a boost in a way that Gun and Gun, Wild Hunt Festival, and Sinome Coliseum did not see. So that'll be neat. At the end of the day, though, if we don't meet a certain threshold and it's not financially wise, and I can't justify it financially, then we won't be pursuing those expansions. I hope that that's not the case, though, because I really would like to. Honestly, I really want to pursue the tabletop role-playing games. That's how Embryo Machine started. It wasn't always a board game. It was a TRPG. About 10 years before, it was a board game. So I would love to be able to touch on that, which I've also discussed in previous episodes. Hope that answers your question, Martyr. The next question comes from Rogue Knight. New format, so will we see a new hat/cap each LionWing talks? That's the hope. I don't know if it'll happen every time, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned. You have to check out the stream or the VOD to see what's going on with my hat situation, or my cap situation is probably more accurate. Since, as I said, ball caps are more my thing. Next question from Gregorio. What do you think of pay to win? Do you think this will get into board games if it hasn't already? So this is interesting. So certainly pay to win is in other forms of tabletop games. Like I think of TCGs as like the ultimate pay to win model. In most cases, I can't say that as a blanket statement for all TCGs, but for a lot of TCGs, yeah, it's pay to win. I mean, even LCGs is, they try to get away from the idea of pay to win, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. LCGs certainly are less expensive to buy into initially, but the LCG model is still an expensive model. And so to some degree, there is an element of pay to win there. It's probably less so than a traditional TCG. I shouldn't say probably. It is less so. But I think it's still there to some degree. In terms of board games, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you do for pay to win in a board game, and I don't know why you would do it. Board games are meant to be self-contained experiences. And so if you're talking about just like general board games, like I'm just grabbing a random board game off the top of my head. Scythe. Like what would pay to win look like there, and what would be your incentive for implementing that model, and then what would be the player's incentive for buying into that model? I don't think there's any real need or benefit or reward or justification or desire for that to happen. Now, you could say, well, there's never a desire for pay to win. And I would say, no, I think you're wrong. I think there is a market out there that loves pay to win. And that's why it continues to be a viable monetization tool for a lot of companies. I don't think you'll see it in board games, though. I mean, I guess you could say like in the more competitive board game scene, but I don't even know what that would look like. You know what I mean? And if it's a competitive scene, then people probably would want to buy into pay to win aspects anyway, because that is the nature of competitive tabletop games, is you are buying in for some of the best access to the best cards or best components. But again, I don't I don't I don't know. I don't like board games pay to win. Someone in the chat said Pokemon Unite is pretty pay to win. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, someone said maybe mini tabletop like BattleTech or Warhammer. Yeah, I was thinking that too, but I don't consider that a board game. I consider that a miniatures war game. So, I mean, absolutely, like Warhammer, in some ways, is pay to win. I think there's less pay to win elements in something like Warhammer as there is in something like Magic, pretty significantly less, because there are ways to circumvent that pay to win. They who spend the most money have access to the best units and therefore steamroll everyone else who doesn't in wargaming, especially with Warhammer, because you can cap at points and you can put certain parameters, and a lot of competitions and tournament scenes will do that. I mean, really, you'd probably see it a little bit more in something like Warhammer Underworld. I think there's some pay to win aspects there for sure. Just because you do have the purchasing of units, but then also there's the card element to it. There's promos, and it's a little dicey. So I guess if you're talking about Warhammer, I would actually probably look more toward their boxed board game stuff than their traditional minis. I still don't see how it works, though. I think it's probably that market that it just isn't the right fit. I think it's probably a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. And that's probably why no one's really tried it that I can think of, because I think people have maybe even thought about it and said, well, there's no real way to make that work. That doesn't make any sense. What would be the buy-in and what would be the purpose of that? So that's a good question, though. Next question's from Sai. Can you give us an estimate on how much flavor / world building versus RPG rules versus illustration there is in Picaresque? Rogue in the chat said, pretty sure EA's tried to think of it. EA seems to be, they've got a lot to do with repaving their road of trust to the customer. So they got a long way to go. But it does seem like there has been a reinvigorated and refocused effort to get back to single player games. I think actually that was just talked about this week in the video game world. EA's drive back towards single player experiences. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. They have spent so many years kind of nickel and diming people that, they've got a lot to prove. I mean, there'll always probably be games from EA that have microtransactions and that are big open world multiplayer specific games. They'll always be the Battlefields of the world. But if they say that they're gonna double down on this single player thing again, like, all right, let's see what you got. I mean, they've produced some decent single player stuff lately. I mean, I just think of Jedi Fallen Order as one of those big single player games that I think really panned out for them. I think not only was it a solid game, but it was critically well received. It was well received from audiences, and it sold well. There are probably some other EA titles. I mean, even the Mass Effect remaster trilogy. So there, okay, we'll see. You got to put your money where your mouth is at the end of the day, especially for a company like EA. I would hope that they would realize that they can't just say they're going to do this and then expect people to be like back on the EA bandwagon. Like you've got a lot of years to undo, and you've got a long road ahead of you for rebuilding trust with your customer base, but maybe they can do it. Yeah, no, I mean, FIFA is just, oh my gosh. So I'm not like a FIFA person, but I do have friends who play FIFA, and I mean, talk about a loot box heavy experience. I mean, it's almost offensive. Um, how how invasive the microtransactions are with FIFA of all the games, right? I mean, I guess I mean, it must make sense on some level, but to me, like of all the games, the football or the soccer game is the one you really like go hard on with the monetization. Like that's so weird to me. Um, Waiting for Japan to make gacha illegal. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that gacha has circumvented the gambling laws in Japan and has done it for so long and apparently so cleverly. It is interesting that gacha still exists, at least in the form that it currently exists in Japan, considering their pretty universal crackdown on traditional gambling. It's very fascinating. Sent in the chat said, yeah, a lot of places around the world are making the whole loot box form of pay to win illegal. So it depends how many follow suit. Yeah, I mean, I think back to that whole Battlefront debacle, right? I mean, what a mess that was for EA. And this is where I'm like, this is where I'm hesitant to like really believe EA. They had a chance after that whole Battlefield debacle to like turn things around then. And even that, yeah, they fixed Battlefront, and Battlefront is a great experience now. But some all whatever qualifying word you want to use there is still present in their other games. It's just not in Battlefront, and it's not as assaultive. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Back to Side's question. Can you give us an estimate on how much flavor slash world building versus RPG rules versus illustration there is in Picaresque? So, yes, Picaresque Roman, A Requiem for Rogues is our latest project. It's hitting Kickstarter August 24th. It is our first foray into the tabletop role playing games scene. And it's got world building, it's got RPG rules, and it's got good illustrations. So what is the ratio balance of those three? I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but there is a really nice balance in that game. How it approaches uh, pulling people in, both newcomers and veterans of the genre alike, keeping them there and giving them new things and new ways to engage with that genre that a lot of other designers and books are just not doing. Now, the TRPG space is such a diverse one, and there are so many cool things happening in the genre right now that I can't say that Picaresque Roman is the most innovative game around, but I can say that it's got some extremely unique, very unique systems. It's part social deduction game, part competitive game, and part traditional tabletop RPG, and it blends these elements together pretty seamlessly for an experience that I can feel confident in saying you're not going to find elsewhere. Now, that seems like blasphemy to say because the scene is so big right now, and there are so many folks getting into the scene, and there are so many works out there and so many different games that it's like, how can you say that this is offering a one of a kind experience? But it really is. No one else is combining all of those elements together. I would just stop right there, full stop. But if you said, well, qualify that a bit more, I would say no one is combining all of those elements together in the way that Group SGR has for Picaresque. On top of that, though, the game strikes this beautiful balance of creating this super fascinating, unique setting. And I'm gonna use the word unique like 1,000 times. So there's my disclaimer that if like you have if you have like a visceral reaction to the word unique, I'm sorry ahead of time. But I can't think of a better word to describe a lot of Picaresque's systems and gameplay approaches and design approaches other than unique. So I'm going to use the word unique quite a bit. So it's got this really unique setting, and it fleshes it out very well. Very well. There's a lot of world building in the book itself. And at the same time, it's not going to bog you down with the minutia of that world. So the book it goes in more depth than just painting in broad strokes, because broad strokes that's too general, that's too vague. And this game is not vague with its setting. It's not vague at all. When you read the book and you're done kind of reading through the lore section, you have a very clear understanding of what the hell this place is. And the setting that it takes place is in this place called the City. It's just called the City, capital C City. And the city is an area that exists both in Japan and out of Japan, so to speak. It operates sort of outside the rules of normal society. It can't be located on any map, and there are specific ways that you have to get into the city, specific things you must do to both find the city and then to actually be allowed into the city. So the setting is really cool, and it fleshes out what that setting is, what it looks like, why it is the way that it is. It will flesh out the factions of the city. So there's a lot of world building elements there. I will say, however, that we are, through at least one stretch goal, going to be adding even more flavor text, should we unlock that stretch goal, to further expand and flesh out what the city is. So we're going to be putting even more world building into the book should we reach this particular stretch goal. So then how does that balance against the RPG systems? So the game utilizes a very straightforward, accessible, and streamlined 2d6 system. And that's pretty traditional of the standard table talk Japanese RPG. And I'm going to say table talk specifically. You might think I should be saying tabletop, but I'm not. I'm specifically saying table talk RPG because there aren't a lot of tabletop RPGs in Japan. Sure, you'll have your Night Wizards and you'll have your Sword Worlds and you'll have your Record of Lodoss War. You'll have those TRPGs out there. The big ones published by Kadokawa, Deadline Heroes, that kind of thing. Outside of those kind of big brand Kadokawa published games, most other role-playing games coming out of Japan are not tabletop RPGs. They are table talk RPGs. And table talk RPGs are a little different than tabletop RPGs in that they are designed around very straightforward 2d6 systems that emphasize one-shot play. They can be linked together for longer campaign play, of course, like any role-playing game. But they really are meant to get you to the table, get you into the action quickly, and get you playing quickly. And if you want, wrap up that story within one session, or expand it out over the course of however long you want, 6 months, a year, or longer. But table talk RPGs are very kind of bite-sized in terms of their scale and their scope, which is awesome. Having in RPGs, I want options. As I've mentioned before, that RPGs are my favorite genre of tabletop games, and so. I feel very passionately about them, and I know exactly what I want out of them. One of the things that I want out of RPGs is I want the ability to engage with that game in whatever way I want, especially if I'm GMing. Like I want to use its systems to build out whatever I want, and table talk RPGs are really great for that. They're great for getting new players to the table, but they're really good at keeping veterans of the genre at the table, which is super cool. And I think Picaresque Roman, because of its streamlined systems, really plays to both crowds extremely well. So yes, it uses a 2d6 system, and so you're really only ever going to be rolling 2d6. However, there's more depth to it than that. I mean, there's depth to a 2d6 system, full stop. That's where that sentence ends. And also, there's more depth to this 2d6 system than perhaps other 2d6 systems. And a lot of that depth is found in how you build your character. And it's also found in how you engage with players, because it does have that social deduction and competitive element to it. And also how it handles combat, which is narrative driven and not miniatures on a grid-based skirmish map. So it's got these RPG systems that you want. It's got these RPG systems that you've never experienced before, or at the very least, you've never experienced in this type of way when combined with all the other elements. So it's got a lot for people who have played a lot of RPGs. There's something to get them to the table and to keep them there. And it's also very, very welcoming to the person that's never played an RPG in their life, has never wanted to play an RPG in their life, or has always been like, oh gosh, I want to play a role playing game, but oh, that seems like a big commitment and a lot of reading and a lot of rules reading. And like, I got to find a group. And during the pandemic, that's hard to do. Picaresque addresses like all of that. And I'm this isn't just me shilling my product. This is me just telling you from player to player, it does all of that. There's a reason why I chose it and not, the other 100 RPGs that I could have chosen from Japan. I chose it for a reason, and I chose it as the first RPG for a reason. And if RPGs are my favorite tabletop gaming genre, to choose Picaresque as the first one that we represent, our first foray into that genre, probably says something about the impression it made on me as someone who adores RPGs, which is probably the best endorsement I could ever give to anything, but especially to this specific game. The other element you talked about, the illustrations. So table talk RPGs tend to be light on illustrations. Tend to be. That's not always the case, but they tend to be. And if they aren't light on them, the illustrations tend to be, kind of subpar. In many cases, like subpar at best. I mean, I hate to say that, but it is the case. I mean, you're talking about Dojin designers who are working on a shoestring budget, and so it's not like they have the means or the access to a bunch of illustrators. Picaresque, it's in its 5th edition in Japan. It's had a lot of room to grow. From the 1st edition to the 5th edition, you can look at that book and say, all right, yeah, like clearly they learned some stuff between all of these editions. One of the things they learned by the time they got to the 5th edition is that illustrations matter. And the illustrations in the 5th edition are fantastic. We added more illustrations. We commissioned over a dozen pieces of new art for the English release of this book. By Table Talk RPG standards, there are a lot of illustrations in this book. By traditional RPG standards, barring, the big Paizos and Wizards efforts, there's a good amount of illustrations here. I think people are going to be very pleased if you show up to tabletop games because of art. This game has that in spades. I don't know if I would say that the art is stronger than the world building or the RPG systems, or if I would say it's weaker than those things. All I can say about the art is that it's really, really good. Like really, really good. It is, and this is just personal preference, so like take this for whatever it means. It's probably my favorite art out of all of the games that we've produced, which, is really saying something, because I like the art of Wild Hunt Festival, and I love the art of Testament. Those art styles and those settings really speak to me as a gamer. So to say that this is probably my favorite art also says something about this game. The art is really fucking good. Takumi-san just knocked it out of the park. One of the things we did for the English release is we got Takumi-san to do all of the illustrations in the entire book. So before, the illustrations were handled by multiple people. I didn't want that. I wanted all of the illustrations to be on the Takumi-san level, because Takumi-san, their art is next level stuff. It just is. And I wanted that quality to be there from page 1 to the very last page. And so it was like, all right, we're doing away with old art, we're re-illustrating it, and we're adding in new pieces of art that, that are specific for the English release. Asking some rough numbers and getting a sales pitch instead. Yeah, that's right. That is exactly right. What do you expect? What do you expect from me? Speaking of, you've got another sort of follow-up question here. Not necessarily about this, but I'll get into it now while I'm looking at Discord. With some games being intended as long-running, Gun and Gun, Embryo Machine, Kradia, maybe Picaresque, how do you future-proof your localizations? Do you give access to the expansions to your staff? Do you play test with the expansions? Does the designer clue you into future games? Yeah, so one of the first things we do, because most of the projects that we have worked on have additional games thereafter, And so one of the things that I always ask for at the very beginning is, all right, what are the changes that you would have made to this game if you could have gone back in time after you made all of the successive games? So that's number one. Number two, what were the disparities or the discrepancies between this game and its sequels, and how do we standardize that stuff? Number three, what were the terms you settled on in games 2, 3, and 4 that you hadn't settled on in game one? Because I want to use those updated terms as opposed to the outdated terms, because every time that I pick up a project that is part of a larger series, I'm already thinking, all right, this is going to be a multi-game project for us. If I have it my way, every game that we release that has an expansion will see its expansion released in the West as well. And so it's important then that we ensure what we localize is the most up-to-date and congruent game with everything else that followed it. So I will talk to the designers early on in the localization process, really before localization has started, when we're making sort of our master doc, our localization master doc, and we're getting all of our terminology down. I ask those questions before that doc has even been created, and then we work that into the master doc. So there you have it. And that's it for our questions. Perfect. Oh, we got some, I got a question in the chat here from Sai. Let's see. You mentioned in the past that you look for the LionWing look. How you want the visuals of all games to be in the same vein for brand identity. In the past, that meant bright colors. Picaresque looks decidedly darker. Is that assessment correct? Is it because it's a TTRPG and not a board game? Is it because you want Picaresque that much? Was it always a soft rule? So it's always, I'll answer your questions in reverse order. It's always been a soft rule, but it's been a rule still. Soft or not, it has been a rule. I want our games to look similar, but I wouldn't say that the defining quality of our games looking similar is based on colors, art style, or setting. I simply have talked about brand identity in the terms of when someone looks at a game, not only do the visuals pop and say, wow, those are unique Japanese visuals, this looks like something LionWing would produce. I want them to say, hold on a second, let me look at this game. And then let me look at this game. And once they've gotten to that second look, I want them to know, regardless of colors, art style, setting, or genre, that this is a LionWing game based on the fact that they can say, no one else would do this game. No one else would take a risk on this game. No one else would give this game a chance outside of its intended territory, outside of its initial region of sales. So it's not just about the look. It's about the look. And it's both of those things. So just because Picaresque is darker, I don't consider it any less of an identifying LionWing game than something that's super bright, like Wild Hunt Festival. LionWing, savior of the risky games. I wouldn't say savior of the risky games. I would say LionWing, the company that is willing to take a risk on risky games, because we can do that. That is and always has been the business model. It's how I built this. You find your margins, you find what you need to be profitable, and then you figure out how you work in your vision to that so that you can be sustainable. And I think I've figured out what that formula is for us, only for us. I don't know what that formula is for any other company in the world, but I know what the formula is for us. And we can right now take risks on games. Now, it's a big gamble every time, because while we can take risks on games, and that's built into the model and the financial model as well, it does mean that if a game doesn't pan out, it does hit us harder than it would a larger company. But that's only because larger companies tend to have a longer tenure and therefore deeper pockets, or at least more coffers to be able to fund a failure. We can fund a failure. We can't fund too many failures. So we can still take the risk it has to be a calculated risk, though. It can't be a risk that's taken without forethought. This has to be a very intentionally thought through risk. I think when people hear like taking a risk on something, people think that, it's a decision that's made. You're flying by the seat of your pants. You're not thinking it through fully. Every game that we've released and will release, I've thought through fully. Some games are less of a risk than others. Some games are more of a risk than others. Some games I'm like, this is a lock. I know it's going to perform. Other games I'm like, this is not as certain because there's not a whole lot to compare this to, but I believe in this game. And if I believe in this game, then I know I can market and I can sell this game. If I don't believe in a game, I know that I'm the worst fucking salesperson ever. I will never get you to buy a product that I can't believe in and that I don't believe in. So you can always bank on the fact that we are going to localize games that other publishers won't take risks on, and also that every game that comes out I fully believe in, and hopefully that counts for something. So then to get to your other questions here, no, it's not because I wanted Picaresque that much, though I definitely wanted Picaresque. I'll talk about that later. And yes, you are right that Picaresque is decidedly darker. That is the setting. Even in the tagline on the lander page and in all of our marketing and in our press release, we talk about how this game is about three things: violence, betrayal, and money. That's kind of like all you need to know to get an understanding of, is this game dark? However, it's not super, super serious dark. This game has some really, really zany stuff about it, some really silly things. And at the same time, it is one of those games that strikes a balance of taking itself serious to a healthy degree and also working in some fun stuff, because what good is an RPG if you can't have fun with it? So, for instance, Tabletop RPGs, and this one will be no different, has what's called a replay in the back of the book, which is a live play session of usually the designers or the designers facilitating a session with other players, and they record the entire transcript in the back of the book. And not only is it a way to learn the rules through other than just reading walls of text about how rules work, but it's an opportunity to see, like, how does this game flow? What is the tone of the game? What did the designers intend the theming of the game to be? How should people conceptualize this game and its world? And so the replay is, to me, part of the magic and the brilliance of a Japanese tabletop RPG. And in the replay that's included in the book, and the replay is long. It's like 40 pages. It's long. They have fun with this game. So it's not like this super serious game where like you're going to come into it and be like, all right, no one's having fun. Don't smile at all. That is not this game whatsoever. But the setting and how it's outlined is serious. And at the same time, even in our writing of the game, we are self-aware. Like, the game is self-aware that what it is pitching is both awesome and kind of wild. And we made a specific decision, and I'm hoping to be able to do one of these shows with Noelle, who was the primary translator and editor on the game. I would love to be able to bring her on, because when I hired her for the project, she came to me with a lot of ideas and kind of created this master doc. And in that master doc was all of this writing on the tone of the game and the tone that she wanted to take with the localization. And we talked about that for a long time. And so everything was very meticulously crafted in this localization. This is hands down our best localization. And that's not just me saying that because like it's our upcoming project. It is just our best localization. It's the tightest. It's the most creative. And I think it's the most engaging, which is cool. So there you have it. Oh, you got another question, Si. In the indie video game world, getting your investment back is not considered a success, just a way of keeping, just a way to keep trying to get a success story. Are you also aiming to get a big return on your titles and keep trying until you do, or get too many failures in a row? Or is your current pace exactly what you want? Okay, so I mean, as a company, you should always be hoping that your upcoming project or an upcoming project in your catalog is going to be a big hit. I've never talked to someone in the publishing world who's been like, "Oh yeah, we don't really want hits. Like we're okay with just like putting out like stuff that only does okay." I've never met that person in my life. And I hope I don't ever meet that. I hope I don't ever meet that person. And I don't want to be that person either. Certainly, with every project, I want it to be a success. I know that some projects are going to be more successful than others. And so, in my role, I have to be realistic about that. And I know that before I like put a contract in front of someone and I go through all the effort of localizing and publishing their work. I already know kind of where it's going to stack up in the things that have already been released and in compared to what is going to be released. You always want to hit, though. Of course, you always want to hit, because greater profitability means higher sustainability, which means you can stick around and you can keep doing what it is you love. You can keep bringing out these badass games that no one else is going to bring out. You can keep allowing designers this new audience that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And so, yeah, you always want to have, you always want your games to be a success story. And of course, you always want like a really big project. And what we're doing right now is perfectly sustainable for LionWing, which is kind of like the best of both worlds. So if we keep pace with where we're at right now, exactly as we are, we're good. And if we have a big project and it blows up, even better. And you know, I think that, you know, there's a possibility for that, which is great. Okay. Sin, you keep taking more of our. Also, who says getting your money back isn't a success for indie game devs? I mean, you will talk to some indie game devs. I remember here's a fun story. I did a presentation on localization a long time ago, a couple years ago, and I said something to the effect of like, you know, I think a lot of us are in this field to be able to do what we love and make a little money in the process. And I remember the audience, who were mostly like indie video game devs, were like, "Oh no, like we do this just for the love of the game." And I'm like, okay, right on. So everyone comes to their industry with different motivations. Everyone is incentivized differently. Some people are fiscally incentivized. Some people are creatively incentivized. And so a game might not do numbers, but if it's critically praised, that might be enough for some people. They're like, hey, that's all I wanted. That sets me up for greater awareness for my next game. But even that thinking, which you hear a lot, is still sort of fiscally conscious. So I don't think you'll ever fully get away from being driven a little bit by the financials, because if you want to keep doing what it is you love in this industry or an adjacent industry, you do have to make a little bit of money. You just do. Unless you want to indefinitely do this as a side gig and like you want to work a job elsewhere and just do this at night in perpetuity. Like, I'm sure those people exist, but I think most people at some point want to be able to commit themselves to the field they are so passionate about. And to be able to do that, you need to be financially secure to some degree. So I do think that even some who won't say they are money motivated, they're still money motivated. It's not as attractive of a story, especially for an indie dev, to say they're money motivated. It's hard for that to be it's not as appealing, you know, in your story, you know, your narrative as an indie dev. So I think sometimes that's why it's left out. Again, there are people out there who are not fiscally motivated like at all. That just doesn't do it for them. I think there are more out there than they would they would claim to be. So, all right. Oh, I missed some stuff here. Is this still the Q&A? Frank, this is still the Q&A. Yes, if we did talk a lot about Picaresque already in one of the questions, because I went off on one of my trademark tangents. Okay. Yeah, Light Alice. Interesting. Guess it depends on if they are indie as a hobby and for the love of it, or if they are trying to climb the ladder. Yeah. I think some people might get into it just for the love of it. You know, they might be younger or whatever, and like they got other stuff going on in their life, maybe at school or a job or whatever the case may be, and it really does just start off as a passion project. I think once you have one success, though, you realize like, hold on a second, I just had the time of my life building this game. I just got recognized for it. Holy shit, this is what I want to do. How do I make sure that the next one is critically and financially successful so I can keep doing this? It always comes back to that. Always. Okay. So that's it for the Q&A. Let's talk about project updates. I got updates on all projects. So Testament, first off, the errata packs are in the production queue. So that's good news. If you read Japanime's Testament update today, you probably saw that. You also saw that EU shipping for Testament is right around the corner, which is great because I know there have been some folks who are clamoring for their games, but are in the EU and have not gotten those games just yet. So it's been a little slower going, but it sounds like the wait is almost over. I don't really have any other information about that because Japanime handles all that. But it is cool to know that the errata packs are in the printing queue. On to some more substantial updates. Wild Hunt Festival. So a couple things. Let's talk about fulfillment. China fulfillment is finished. Canada is in active fulfillment right now and will be finished by week's end. We're waiting on confirmation that the pallets arrived at the UK depot for distribution. We haven't gotten that confirmation yet, but the fact that that is what we're waiting on to me says that the pallets have probably already arrived, but they haven't been inventoried yet, which means the UK is in fact closer to getting Wild Hunt Festival than they ever have been. And hey, we got a team tournament coming up. Last week, Real Beans and Sin Theory, our two community leads, and I met to discuss the rules and the overall objective and setup of the Wild Hunt Festival Team Tournament League that is going to be launching next month. They put the bow on that design doc last week. I'm going to be posting an update to the Wild Hunt Festival campaign page tomorrow detailing that league, how to sign up, what the rules are, and various other details concerning that whole experience, as well as giving the update on where various regions are in terms of their fulfillment. But at this point, we are about a little over 90% fulfilled. So the project really is coming to a conclusion. Now, in August, we also still have DLC pack number 2, Poo Boo Rhapsody, to look forward to. So you're not done with Wild Hunt Festival because that's only DLC pack 2, which obviously isn't here yet. So you've got that to look forward to, and then you've got DLC pack 3 to look forward to in the fall. So there's stuff going on there. I think 2022 will also be a good year for Wild Hunt Festival. So I just really love that property. I love that world. I love the game itself. I love the gameplay of Wild Hunt Festival. It is probably my ideal type of board game experience. And so to be able to stick with that world and to do more with it, and really just to be able to work with Liner Note and Ramo specifically, it just is a very appealing part of continuing to work with and in the world of Kradia. Liner Note and Ramo specifically, because he's my main contact, is so easy to work with and is so nice and has great ideas himself, is very open to other ideas. We've come up with a lot of ideas collaboratively, which has been super great. And at the same time, he knows when it's his game and he knows when to say, well, hold on, this is how it should be because this is what I envisioned for this. And here, let me tell you why I thought of it that way. And I'm like, right on, man, it's your game. Like at the end of the day, you got final say. And he's got such a clear vision of what Kradia is that it's so easy to work with him. There's no there's nothing vague about Kradia and what the future is for that game, and there's nothing vague about what that game is mechanically and also what its world is. And so he's always got an answer and he's always got a vision, and that's the kind of designer that I want to work with every single time. Someone who is clear in what they want and where they're going, and then can, communicate that clearly to me so that we can then communicate it to all of you. Gun and Gun. So here's some good news. I saved it for tonight. Gun and Gun and all of the backer rewards will be on the container ship on August 20th. So we got confirmation of that 2 days ago from the printer. That mass production is now wrapping up, and that it will be on the international freight ship at the end of, not the end, but the third week of August. So ships are getting out of harbor quicker right now in China, which is good. This isn't like a Wild Hunt Festival in most cases where a ship is sitting at port for a long time. There were a lot of logistic issues and sort of departure queues that were holding up ports clearing just as soon as 2 or 3 months ago. The situation has changed a little bit there, and so they've got a smoother process for clearing ports, which is cool, which means that they get on the boat on the 20th. They're not going to leave on the 20th. Obviously, that's not how these things work, but that means that it won't sit in port for a month like it did with Wild Hunt Festival, which is just wild, but that's the state of the world. So really, the end is near, y'all. Gun and Gun is almost here, and I said it before with another thing. I'll say it again now because it's true, and you know that I like to say it. We've never been closer to getting Gun and Gun than we are right now. So August 20th is the big day. And I know it's the big day because I got all of the shipping paperwork that I had to fill out, which means that this is happening. It's real. And then I had to then coordinate a bunch with Fun Again because they're going to be fulfilling this project for us as well, which also means that, shit's getting real. So yeah, the end is in sight. I'm really excited. I can't wait for people to actually play that game with physical components. It's cool being able to play stuff over Tabletop Simulator. Don't get me wrong. I love TTS. It's just not the same though. And so even those of you who have been around with Gun and Gun from the beginning and have been ravenous about pouring over everything that is Gun and Gun, I think this for you will even be revitalizing and refreshing to finally get your hands on the game, because it changes it. It changes your connection to that game. It changes your investment in that game. It changes how you relate to that game and then how you engage with it. So even for our most diehards who might feel a little bit of Gun and Gun burnout recently, I think that this will be a chance to have a fresh start again. And I'm really excited about that. Might pass out just by touching the cards or even touching the box. Yeah, the box feels really good. I'm not going to lie. So I love matte boxes. Matte boxes are my favorite. So matte finishes are my favorite. I'm not going to lie. I hate linen finishes. There, I said it. I think linen finishes look great. Don't get me wrong. The linen finishes on Wild Hunt Festival, chef's kiss, right? Me personally, as a player, linen finishes. I want matte finishes all day long across the board on everything. Matte finish on the box, matte finish on the cards, matte finish on the manual. I want a spot treatment for that UV logo on the box. I mean, I have very specific stuff that I like when it comes to the presentation of games, and anything matte related is just it's just a thing of beauty. It just is. And so the Gun and Gun box, like the Wild Hunt Festival box, feels so soft to touch. It's just velvety. I love it. Burnout from all the overheat. I see what you did there. Okay, so speaking of Tabletop Simulator, let's move into Embryo Machine's update. Thanks to everyone who's provided feedback on that rulebook thus far. What's been really great about that rulebook is the only feedback that we've gotten a bit of feedback where someone was like, "Hey, the card that you included here doesn't have the right information," which was a good catch. We had already fixed that card when we did our last round of edits. We did not remember to fix it in the rulebook. Aside from that, though, all the feedback that we've gotten has mostly been stylistic things. And for like, oh, well, this is a little vague here. You could use this wording and this might clear things up. What's been great is we haven't gotten like, oh, that word spelled wrong, or like, oh, that's like the syntax is messed up in that sentence, or like, oh, you're missing some like punctuation here, like there's a grammar error here, which is that's what I'm looking for. But all the feedback has been very good stuff. It's been qualitative feedback, which is nice, just to get different perspectives from different people, and then you kind of compare all the feedback to say like, oh, okay. So like multiple people have pointed this out. We should probably do something about that. So thank you to everyone who's taken the time to do that. I know it's not exactly fun to pour over rule books and like look at them with a critical eye like that. So I really appreciate those who have been willing to do that. But speaking of Embryo Machine, yes. All of the files were submitted to the individual who handles all of our Tabletop Simulator versions and demos. And so by week's end, we will be getting Fornice's deck, a new battlefield, a battlefield board joint, therefore giving you the ability to finally play with 2 battlefields, expand that battlefield out, which gives you the option to play 2v2. Or 1v1, v1, v1, whatever you want to do there. You've now got 2 battlefields to utilize and to fight on, which is going to open up a whole new world of tactics and strategy, and that's kind of what we're looking to do here. We chose to go with Fornice because, hey, Fornice is my favorite EM in the game, and so it was time to get Fornice in there, and because we don't have another EM like that in the demo already, there's not really another EM like Fornice anyway. But we thought, we've got some heavy hitters in the Tabletop Simulator version. It's time to get like the opposite of a heavy hitter. We want to introduce this element that allows you to play the game in a very different way, because Fornice requires you to reconceptualize your entire approach to that game. And so not only is Fornice my favorite, but I think it's the right call in terms of adding gameplay diversity to the Tabletop Simulator version. All right. Checking up on the chat here. Af, yes, I know. Af, I was mostly speaking to you when I was talking about burnout. I know you really probably felt burnout the most. I noticed it around Operation Bulletstorm. I could tell it was setting in. So, Light Alice says, Linen Finish is great in my opinion, but when it's a cheap one, it's the worst thing ever, and I hate it so much. Yeah, the funny thing is, like, so we did not do a cheap Linen Finish on Wild Hunt Festival. Because again, like, if I'm going to do Linen Finish, which I don't like, I'm going to do it well, because then I'll dislike it less. And so then it's like, all right, I can tolerate it because I know like everyone else in the world loves Linen Finishes. So I wasn't going to cheap out on that. Still though, I'm like, why did I have to offer that social goal where we upgraded everything to linen? And B, why did people want linen? Because, I want matte on everything. Sin Theory says, now I can take that 70% loss ratio playing with beans on my team. I'm assuming you're talking about with the addition of Fornice. It is going to be interesting. Fornice is really hard to play. My favorite EM in the game, but took me a long time to really feel proficient and effective playing Fornice, because the style is unlike any of the other EMs. Some of the other EMs, I mean, every Embryo Machine unit, like the standard loadout, is different, and each unit in the game feels different, has like their own ways of approaching combat. You look at Arachne, there's a lot of mine placement, that kind of thing, which makes Arachne very distinct, but all of the EMs feel different in many regards, and at the same time, some of the EMs, you're like, okay, yeah. So if I played this EM, I kind of know how I'm going to play this one too. That is not Fornice. You can play all, if you play the 8 other Embryo Machine units in the game and then you get to Fornice, you're still you're still not going to be prepared to be able to play Fornice well, which is really exciting to me for people to be able to check out that kind of engagement with the game through the implementation and incorporation of Fornice. Yeah, karate is nice. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I figured, hey, if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna do this thing I absolutely hate, we're at least gonna do it right. Use matte sleeves. That solves your problem. Sai, I hate sleeves. I'm never gonna do that. Never. And to me, that doesn't matter because just because you put matte sleeves on it doesn't change the fact that the game was not meant to be matte then, right? Like if I have to use some third party component to make the game feel the way that I feel, that I'm probably not experiencing the game that it was in the way that it was meant to be played, but then also B, I'm kind of changing the experience, and it fucks with my head because I'm like, well, I'm making the game something that the designers didn't want me to experience, and then I'm like, well, then I don't want to play like that because I want to play the game as it was designed. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole head game for me. So no, using matte sleeves won't work for me for many reasons. Oh, we got someone new just joined the Discord. Sweet. It's always nice to see. Thanks, Sin, for welcoming them. And that is it for... Oh, no, it's not it. Of course it's not it, because we just announced yesterday our upcoming Kickstarter project, which I've already talked about at length in the show. Picaresque Roman, A Requiem for Rogues. Our first tabletop role-playing game, one of the most popular doujin, or if you will, although it's not a perfect comparison, indie Japanese tabletop RPG. No, doujin and indie are not the same thing, but they are close enough, so I will use them interchangeably sometimes. Of course, if you're talking about folks who are really into Japanese gaming, then I'll talk doujin all day, and I will never use the word indie, but you get the point. So, Picaresque Roman. This game is fantastic, and Light Alice, I saw you. It's so weird calling you Light Alice, Mox. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I know you said in a previous show that I could just call you Mox anyway, but now I'm like, well, no, I can't call you Mox because that's not your name. You chose Light Alice for a reason and not Mox, and I have to call you Light Alice. I will get there though, I promise. So as Light Alice mentioned in a tweet, the game's been sitting back there this whole time, right? And I think Sai and Light Alice had some thoughts about, hey, maybe it's Picaresque. I think. Well, no, you didn't ruin anything, Light. You didn't because you didn't commit to it. You were like, I can't remember your exact wording, but you're like, well, if it's not Picaresque, I don't know what it is, but that wasn't like a firm commitment to like, it's Picaresque. So people were none the wiser, because other people just jumped in and I was watching the chat go down, other people saying like, well, no, I don't think it's an RPG because like, Bradley alluded to like, that was going to be a later on project. So I can't imagine that'd be the next one. And I'm like, yeah. Keep getting off the trail. So I was watching the chat, kind of wrapping up my hands in delight. But yeah, it's been sitting back there the whole time, staring y'all in the face. Some people have asked about it, like, "Hey, what's that thing back there?" And I've talked about it sort of casually, but I never really fully committed to talking about it. Yeah, Light Alice said, "Yeah, you had us all convinced it wasn't that." Well, that's why I've decided that I'm no longer engaging in the conversation when we put up the project code name because I'm just going to give it away. So I learned my lesson with Midnight Saga. So I don't even know if you can say that I had you all convinced it wasn't that. I just didn't say anything. Y'all convinced yourself it wasn't that. I had no part of that. But yeah, it's been sitting back there the whole time. We've been working on this project for a long time. We inked this contract back in 2019. So early 2019. So this has been a long time. It's been a long time coming. let's see here. So I said, was it never intended to be a shop item? And I got it wrong all the way. You did get it wrong all the way. It was never intended to be a shop item. So the thing that I've alluded to as being the shop item is not that. So, stay tuned for what that is going to be. That reveal was supposed to happen with the launch of the new website and the new web store, but there were some complicating factors, some unforeseen circumstances that were out of our control. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, that was never going to be that. Something like Picaresque, really just a role-playing game in general, role-playing game localization is an expensive endeavor. So it couldn't be a shop item. This is by itself, the localization, not taking into account like the marketing and everything, has been more expensive an endeavor than Made Knight Saga by quite a bit. So this has been, yeah. I mean, anytime you're translating and then editing and then QAing and proofreading and re-editing that much text, that's just very expensive. So Kickstarter was the right path forward for this, and tabletop RPGs are doing quite well on Kickstarter. So yeah, it's coming to Kickstarter August 24th. About 4 weeks away now, 4 weeks from this past Tuesday. So we're doing a full 4-week ad campaign, which we've never had the luxury of doing. We're always strapped for time and rushing to get something out. So the most we've had prior to this was a 3-week ad campaign, which was for Wild Hunt Festival. This is a full 4 weeks, so I'm really excited to be able to offer that. Yeah, this is. I mean, I kind of talked a lot about the project already in the Q&A section, but I've been waiting to announce this for a long, long time. It was interesting because we, so we inked this contract in early 2019, and the book that we got then was the 4th edition. Well, because of timelines and certain projects taking precedent and various things, both in our control and out of our control, the project got pushed back and pushed back. It was originally we were looking at launching in 2019. Then we amended that date to spring 2020. Then the pandemic hit, and we're like, "Fuck, what's going to happen here?" So we changed it again. By the time we got into the full localization, the 4th edition had already come and gone. 5th edition was coming out, and so we had to like go back through and like work in a bunch of new text, and that kind of messed with our master doc and a lot of other things. And so at times it kind of felt like, holy shit, this project is a lot more complicated than I ever thought it was going to be, just because the timelines have fucked everything up. And so the localization should have been very straightforward, but then wasn't, because I should know by now that no localization is ever straightforward. And if you find the localization that is straightforward, you should be worried. That's not how it's supposed to go at this point. I have realized doing this for as long as I've been doing it. So this has been a long time coming. Group SGR has been very, very patient, very gracious with us having to push it back and push it back. I think at one point they probably thought like, these fucking people are never going to release this game. We signed this contract. They're never releasing this game. But I kept assuring C. Gray, the main designer and the head of Group SGR, like, no, it's coming. I promise. We're just getting to it. It's a process. So, how swag will the dice be as an add-on? I can't talk about it just yet. So at minimum, the dice will be a step up in terms of quality and aesthetic from the Wild Hunt Festival dice. But we are inquiring about something else, sort of an enhanced variation of those dice, and that should the numbers work out, the cost work out, we are going to offer those, and that's going to be pretty awesome. yeah, that's going to be pretty awesome. Precision dice and certain build quality and material. They look great. So you can see the concept, the aesthetic of the dice on the lander page. Winona updated that lander image, the main masthead or the main Kickstarter project banner. You can see what the dice will look like in concept there. Really cool, very thematic with various graphic design elements of the book. Really excited about these dice. Really excited about these dice. Even if the enhanced version doesn't work out, the cost is too high, and I'm like, I don't know. When I look at how many people I think will pledge to get them versus the cost, like even if that doesn't work out and the numbers don't match up, and we go with the original idea, I'm still really stoked about these dice. Like really stoked about these dice. I'm late, but hello, Noel. You joined just in time because I just started talking about Picaresque. So yeah, you're right in time. Sin Theory, I will never have a game I am not looking forward to as long as LionWing is around. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we have more pledge tiers for Picaresque's campaign than we have in any of our previous campaigns. So I think there's a tier for everyone. I mean, like really, if you want to get in at like low cost, very affordable, kind of get the basic stuff, we got a tier for you. If you want to upgrade some stuff, we got a tier for you. If you want to really upgrade some stuff, we got a tier for you. If you want to spend some serious fucking money, we got a tier for you too. That's a special tier. Something we haven't really done before. We got a tier for you. I mean, I think there are 6 tiers. I think that's about right. I've gone on the record before and I've said that I like 2 to 3 tiers. That's my sweet spot. I had to break that self-imposed rule though, because it made more sense to do more tiers for this project. I'm never going to stick to a rule just for the sake of sticking to a rule because I said it's a rule. All my rules are fluid. If they make sense to break, I will break them. I am not afraid to do that. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so we got 6. Also, this is our best looking campaign. I mean, best looking campaign. Best looking campaign. Noel, love translating it. Very fun game. Yeah, I loved you translating it. Very easy to work with. I trusted you with this book, and what you produce is just chef's kiss good. So definitely looking forward to continuing to work together. Light Alice, I'm pretty pulled in by the theme and even by TTRPGs in general, but the main reason I've never played one is the whole GMDM thing. I don't really vibe with a game that doesn't run itself to a certain level. I have no idea really, though, like I said, but what are your thoughts on this and how it relates to PR? Yeah, so I understand, and I think a lot of people feel that way. In my younger days, I shared that sentiment. Like in my young days, I shared that sentiment. I wanted a game that I didn't have to rely on someone else to tell the story for me, to be able to enjoy the story. And sometimes it's just hard finding a GM, especially if you're not a super social player. You kind of like to stick to yourself, or you like to stick to your group, and no one in that group is like the type of person who would dig not playing the game, instead running it. Like, yeah, that TTRPGs are hard to get into. Then that's like a real barrier of entry. And no matter what the genre does, that barrier to entry will always be there. Yeah, you can find automated GM'd games or games that use an automated GM system, but they will never be as dynamic as a human being telling the story and sort of spinning that tale and reacting to what the players are doing in real time. And so to me, I love solo play tabletop RPGs, but they'll never take the place of a traditional tabletop RPG, because I do like the storytelling aspect that only a human can provide. That being said, yes, Noel, You can help with the question too. Absolutely. Noel, I was saying before you jumped in that I would like to have you on one of these shows, especially once the Picaresque Kickstarter is live, because I'd like for us to talk about the localization process and for you to talk about what that was like from your end of things. But yes, Noel, by all means, feel free to jump in there in the chat as well and offer up a response there. I will say this. So the system that Picaresque uses encourages a lot of the storytelling to happen through the players more so than other games that need the GM to be the one moving that story along. The players in Picaresque and just how its systems are set up and how it approaches its gameplay, which is a very narrative-driven gameplay approach, lends itself really well to the group being the storytellers. Now, the group in any TRPG will always be the primary storytellers, and the GM is there to move things along and to get folks to certain points. But you know, I play a shit ton of TTRPGs. Oftentimes, though, in other games, the GM feels like the driver and everyone else is the passenger. I would say, more so than most, this is a game where it feels like the players often are the driver and the GM is the passenger. And the GM is just kind of pointing out, like, oh, hey, there's a detour up ahead here. Maybe we could go down this path. You know, I mean, so that it's. I don't know if that comparison does anything for you, but it does feel like the players oftentimes are the one really driving the story. The players should always be the ones driving the story. It just seems really front and center with how this game is designed to have you interacting with one another. But then there's that social deduction and that competitive piece of this game that just simply isn't there in most other role-playing games. And for purists of the TTRPG genre, that will probably push them away, unless they're someone who's like, you know what, I want to take a chance on kind of a new approach to this thing I love. But that the social deduction and the competitive element also make this feel a little bit more gamey, board gamey, dare I even say, than a traditional role-playing game. So you'll still need that game master. You'll still need a GM. There's no getting around that. But I think you might realize that you need the GM a little bit less in this game than other games. I would also say, and this is something I mentioned in the chat, I think it was in response to something Sai said, this is also the type of game that you don't need to be in person to play. I mean, you don't need to be in person to play TTRPGs anymore anyway, but because this game doesn't approach combat in the traditional way, because it's mostly all narrative-driven combat, you're kind of talking through what you're going to do, and then you're going to roll dice for checks and that kind of thing. You don't need to get a big group together. You can just arrange it online. You can play over Discord, play over Skype, play over whatever platform you want, and you're good. And so that kind of eliminates a little bit of the importance of the GM as well. So Noel here is saying, I'll read this for folks. In my opinion, the GM position in PR is mostly a facilitator role than, say, DM. In D&D, you tend to need to make up characters, plot, etc. PR, meanwhile, if your group is into it, they simply carry the play themselves, with the GM just there to make sure the social deduction part is conducted fairly. You can be a little more in by using the optional bodyguard rules, but they're definitely optional. And yes, Noel says, I would definitely agree. It feels a lot like it incorporates board game design. Yeah, which is one of its unique selling points. There is this element of like and it's even talked about in the book, that there's this system that you could call sort of a PvP VGM system. So it does have some board game elements to it. I think that's what makes it really refreshing. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like Noel and it sounds like we just coordinated our answers. We did not. But it goes to show that the game really is player driven more than, D&D, Pathfinder, whatever. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Light. I would say, if you're pulled in by the theme, like I said, there's a tier for everyone. There's a low cost tier too, And that might be an option for you, unless you're someone who absolutely has to have physical product, in which case we are foregoing the route of soft covers, because I hate soft covers in most cases for TTRPGs. And so I just said, I'm not doing a softcover book for this game. We're going to offer hardcover. So if you want a physical edition, yeah, you'll have to buy in a little higher. But if you just want to check it out, there's absolutely a tier for you to get in that is very cost friendly. Low cost tier as in PDFs. Yes, Fern, that's right. Yeah. We pack it. Not only is the low cost PDF tier low cost, but we're not just like packing in the book. That tier has 3 items packed into it. So it's like we're packing in quite a bit into each of the tiers. In fact, so not only do we have more tiers for Picaresque's campaign than any other campaign we've run, but we've never offered so many things per tier. But it's like, it's good stuff. It's not just shit that's there to say that we like are packing in a bunch of stuff just for the hell of it. That's not the case. But I am looking at, I'm looking at our all-in tier here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I mean, there's 12 items in that tier, plus whatever we unlock through stretch goals. Never before have we offered almost 12 items in a single tier. Yeah, and actually, I take it back, Fern. That low-cost PDF tier, there's actually 4 items packed into there, not 3, plus the stretch goal. So, Lanniston, sorry I'm late. I was cooking, eating taco salad. Hey, Lanniston, if there's a reason to be late, it's to eat taco salad. So, you're solid. Let's see here. Side. My mom was hounding me for a birthday gift idea this week. The Kickstarter and my birthday kind of line up. I guess you solved that problem for me. Yeah, I would also say that this turnaround for this Kickstarter is going to be faster than any of our other Kickstarters, because everything is done. Yeah, like done. So, and it's easier and faster and more efficient to print books than it is to print games with a shit ton of components. So, yeah, turnaround time will be quite quick. Lannison just got my Kratia shipping notice. Glad to hear it. Good. Stoked for you to try it out. Fern says, I actually love PDF-based RPG stuff. Prefer not to waste a bunch of paper on D&D books, and then everything is word searchable. Yes. Yep. So now the good news is if you pledge to like one of the physical copies of the books, you're going to get all the PDF stuff as well. So, like for me, I love all the games that I play. I have both if they're offered, because I want both. I want the hard book because I want to read it like in bed at night. I want to read through it all, and I want to be able to read it on the couch when I'm upstairs hanging out with the family or whatever. And I don't want to be on my phone. I want to be able to display it on my shelf. And at the same time, when I play the game, I almost never use that actual physical book. I'd rather use a PDF or something that is searchable. So everyone's different, though. And that's why we're offering 6 tiers with a bunch of stuff packed into each tier. There seems to be content fans created in Japan. Were you able to incorporate some of it in the Kickstarter? Yeah, so they ran Group SGR ran a whole scenario contest. I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, when I say this is one of the most popular doujin tabletop RPGs in Japan, I actually mean it. And so they ran a contest a couple years ago with their audience that was basically like, hey, create a scenario, submit it to us. We'll pick like the best one or whatever. They ended up just taking all of the scenarios that were submitted to them for the contest and threw them all up on their website. And so you can go download them. There's like a dozen. Actually, I think there's over a dozen. Super cool stuff. I mean, the scenarios range in quality, of course. Some are actually really, really good. Some, kind of very straightforward, short things. But a lot of fan-created content. And us in fan contests. So You never know what might be hiding down the road. Yeah, so Noel said the third scenario in the core book is their favorite. I like the scenarios in the book. I like Rise and Fall. That Rise and Fall is my favorite. I don't want to give away too much about what that is. Sin Theory said, I had this issue with my group. Until recently, I was the only one willing to GM. Once I stopped and we no longer played, they eventually decided to step up and do it. Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of unique social dynamics that are only present in tabletop games. And one of them is like, who's going to GM the game and how into it is that person going to be? And are they just doing it because they have to and they'd rather be a player? Or do they really just want to be a GM? So like for me, I like a healthy balance, but my balance of player to GMing is not 50-50. That's not the healthy balance for me. The balance for me is 80-20. I want to GM 80% of the time and I want to be a player 20% of the time. But everyone's different. Some people are like, I never want to GM in my life. I'm 100% a player. Other people are like, no, I'm 50-50. Other people are like, I'll GM 10% of the time and I'll play 90% of the time. And that's the beauty of TRPGs and is indicative of how inclusive the space is. It's part of why it's my favorite genre. I mean, part of why I love the genre is because I love the gameplay, right? I love the storytelling. I love the interactivity with other human beings, but I like the inclusivity and the diversity that's out there in the space that you're not getting in any other space in this industry, in the tabletop industry, and really you're not getting in any other industry either, at least not in terms of quality and quantity that you do in the TRPG space. So yeah, so you'll have people that are like, I never want to GM, I always want to GM, I always want to be a player, whatever, and like, awesome. Just like know what your limits are, like know what your ratio is for that. I think that's super important. And also, if you've got people who are on the fence, say, hey, we'll run a one shot, like see if you like it. Like, let's run a 2-hour one shot. Like, if you're like, this is not for me, cool. Like, at least now you know. Like, someone doesn't have to commit to a 12-month campaign to be a GM if they're not sure they want to do that. So let's see here. For sure, I'll go for the all-in for Requiem. The all-in's good. Let Alice. Yeah, that'd be my hope. I want to actually play the game, so that's my big worry as to whether or not the genre is worth it for my group. I'm like the only one invested in the hobby outside of Catan, maybe. Yeah, so I really do think this game straddles that line of like, it's for newcomers. This is, Picaresque is one of the best TRPGs you could introduce to a group that's never played one before. Hands down. Again, I'm not saying that because I'm trying to shill a product. Like, that's just straight up. I don't even feel like it's subjective. I feel like that's objective. I feel that strongly about the system, that it's very, very accessible and streamlined. So if you've never played before, this is a great place to start. And there's so much meat on that bone, though, that if this is not your first time and instead it is your 100th time, you are going to love what this game has to offer because it approaches the genre that you've known in a way that you haven't experienced before. And there's a lot to stick around for. So yeah, I mean, maybe it would be the right fit for your group, light, or maybe it's a terrible fit. I mean, obviously only you and them will know. Hopefully it is, though. But if not, it's not. It's good, but how much, Bradley? I want to know how much my wallet will be destroyed after that. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to talk about pricing here, but like I said, so we got 6 tiers at various price points. The lowest price point is the lowest priced tier we've ever offered in any of our campaigns, ever. So you can get in for very little. If like you just want to dip your toes in, you're like, I don't know if this is for me, but like it kind of sounds cool. I'll try it out. Like you don't have to overcommit to see if it's for you. And then we've got 2 steps up from there, and then we've got an all-in tier, and then we've got our kind of like our big tier. So again, the campaign is kind of like, it's one of those campaigns where it's like, spend on it what you want, because we've got enough variation in pricing that I think we'll have something for pretty much everyone who is going to be interested in backing a game on Kickstarter like this. Yeah, I mean, the RPG space just continues to explode, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. I think that this, because of how vast the space is, because of how important people find it, because of how important it is for a lot of people to have a game where they can socially interact and immerse themselves in a world that isn't their own, in a character that isn't them, in a space that by and large is very safe, in a space that allows you to be someone else or be your authentic self, because there is so much diversity when it comes to who's creating the games, who's publishing the games, who's playing the games, what type of settings there are, what type of mechanics there are. Because of all of that, I think that this genre will just continue to increase in popularity. I mean, the board game industry in general is just going to continue to increase in popularity. That's happening too. I do think that while the board game trajectory continues to be upward in a very extremely healthy way that is not slowing down anytime soon, I actually think the climb for TRPGs is probably even greater. I think you're seeing that popularity rise up to a greater degree than traditional board games, even though traditional board games are killing it, and that's not going to end anytime soon. Hopefully it's not going to end anytime soon, because hey, we're part of that. Lighthouse, yeah, I draw the line. Crazy levels of investment when someone learns an entire different language just for their hobby. Mm-hmm. Will you create a tier for me if I don't find what I want in the selection? No. I like you, Sai. I don't like you that much. I kid. Noel, the game's translator and editor. I think on that note, Picaresque really is suited to one-shots over campaigns, and it totally is fine with repeating characters across one-shots, so kind of stringing them together into a campaign-like situation. So even doing like a round-robin style of GMing would certainly not be a problem. GMing itself is very easy to do. It takes very little prep work, at least for this game. And if you like GMing it repeatedly, you can use the bodyguard rules, which again are sort of optional rules, to make your own rogue and go after the players directly. The GM in this game doesn't, I didn't mention this before, but the GM isn't strictly a storytelling role here. They're not strictly there to move the characters and the plot forward. That's part of the role, but they can actually get involved in the game themselves. So there is like this weird hybridization of like, I'm a GM and a PC, which is cool. No, that's fine. No, you can give that away. Plus, even if you couldn't, you just did so. But no, it's fine. I love RPGs, but mostly as interesting lore or source books. I don't really have a group to play with them, but I have been backing Exalted 3rd Edition stuff, as you should. And instead of art books for games like Zombicide and Joan of Arc, I got RPG books. Yes. So there's, as I mentioned this in the Q&A, there's some cool lore. There's some cool lore for this game. I love, there are factions in the city. The city, capital C, is where this game takes place, and the factions are super cool. Super cool. The game's just tone and vibe is just so like I don't know. It's so modern in like Yakuza meets Persona meets Black Lagoon. So good. Sai, I mean, and this is in reference to what Noel said before about spoiling or whatever. I mean, the game exists in Japanese. The real spoilers are Lionwing's adaptation specifics. Yeah, kind of. Not everyone, though, will be able to navigate to the Japanese portion and be able to know what the game is about. Just to put the idea into people's heads, even if you don't have an IRL group you think you could get to play with you, you have the whole LionWing Discord and put a group together to play online. Yes, 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 yes. So, okay, so not only do you have options if you don't have an IRL TRPG group, I mean, you've got Roll20, for instance, and a number of the other platforms that have sprung up since then and that are like it. But yes, we are going to host space for people who want to run games of Picaresque. So I would imagine because thus far we have built up a following of folks who are mostly board gamers. I think you might find a lot of people kind of in that area, like, yo, this game looks rad. Like, I want to play this and I don't have a group. I think you'll find many other people in this Discord that are of the same sentiment. Combine forces. Play that shit on Discord. So, Sai, that actually is true. And I'm not just saying that, that's actually true. Sai said, I just realized that Project Requiem and Picaresque Roman have the same initials. Was this planned? It actually was. There were I had many code names that I was debating on when deciding simply on Project Requiem. But one of the factors when I had kind of everything written out on my board of like, all right, so this name and this name, this name, and what does this mean? And here are the things that people might like associate with this or whatever. One of the things was, yes, the initials actually equal the game initials. So that was a real thing. Once you say you're going to need a GM for LionWing plays, I'll be so in. Yeah, so I think it would be fun to do a LionWing plays with Picaresque. Lighthouse. I think I'm sold now hearing about the GM involvement. I just want to make characters, honestly. Yeah, and I don't know how much people did searching, how much people like started searching for news on Picaresque when the news broke yesterday. But we did include in our press release, which is now up on our website, a little bit about like very light bits of character creation, such as like what are the game's core the game's core classes. Classes in this game are called gigs. You've got your main gig and your side gig. There are 5 core main gigs and then 21 side gigs, and you can mix and match those however you want to make whatever kind of character you want. So your core classes, your core main gigs are Yakuza, Info Broker, Gambler, Heartbreaker. Oh, I'm missing one. Oh. Swindler. There we go. So those are your 5 core main gigs. But then you can pair those up with the 21 other side gigs. So you can make a Yakuza character who's also an idol, if you wanted to. You can make a swindler who's also a lawyer. I mean, you can mix and match, and you can create whatever wild, zany mishmash of character that you want. I mean, that's the cool thing about the game setting, the city. And I'm not going to go into the setting too much because I do want to save, a good number of stuff for you to see for the first time when the campaign launches. But how the city is formatted and like what it is and what it offers players, it all makes sense in terms of like what gameplay options you have. Because the city is a wild place. It's lawless, essentially. I mean, there are laws, but there aren't laws. Any laws that are there have been implemented, by the people of the city, not by some governing body or doctrine that people have to follow. And that's the beauty of the city. It is, true sort of lawlessness, but there are factions in the city, and these factions control elements of the city. And so you do have to sort of play by some of their rules depending on which parts of the city they control and how they operate and what they do within the city itself. So, yeah, aren't all lawyers automatically swindlers? No comment. Bradley is the master of shilling games after all. What can I say? I'm really not shilling though tonight. I'm just talking about a game that I freaking love, that I really believe in. So, all right. So that's Picaresque. We'll be releasing more, more details, more images, illustrations, that kind of thing as we get closer. In the run up to a campaign, we always do not only an ad campaign push, so you'll see it on Instagram and Facebook if you utilize those platforms, but you'll also see just tweets and posts on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter that will talk a little bit about the game, show off some illustrations early, that kind of thing. So just stay tuned if you want to see more. So with our new format, I said, I was going to grab news stories from across the tabletop industry that I found interesting, and I was going to provide some cogitations on what those stories are. As part of our reformatting and reshuffling this show, some of the reshuffling of the show won't just be in the addition of this segment, but it will be in the addition of other segments in the future, such as what I'm hoping to do with Noel, talking about the localization of Picaresque, but also bringing on Winona to talk about the graphic design elements of Picaresque, because this was a huge undertaking in terms of the visual presentation of the game, because we kept exactly 0 parts of the overall aesthetic and visual presentation of the Japanese release. Now everything was coordinated with and given approval from Group SGR, but a lot of the stuff was just our own ideas. And I want to bring on Winona to talk about how she came up with this stuff, because print layout is her background. So like Winona's good at many, many things. Print layout is like her thing. So this was like the perfect marriage. And when I was putting together the team, like there wasn't even like another thought about who was going to do the graphics of this game. It was going to be Winona all along. We will you keep adding sections. We will never get to this legendary 1-hour show. We probably won't. I'm beginning to realize that might be a pipe dream. So let's talk about some news that I found interesting. And the first one comes from Dicebreaker. And it's the story about board game shipping delays and how things are not slowing down. And that we are realizing now that not only are shipping delays going to be an expectation going forward, and we should all be talking about them up front with customers and priming them to be ready to have a game say it's going to be delivered in May and then not actually get delivered in December, until December. But we also need to prime folks that those magical shipping costs that were so cheap a year ago are no longer a thing. And that if people are offering low shipping costs right now in this era and going forward for the next 12 months, it's only because they were able to build in the shipping costs that they're eating into the core price of their game or their pledge tier if they're on Kickstarter. And so there's no getting around that this hobby is about to get more expensive. It's going to take longer for us to get our stuff, and it's going to be more expensive. So, we're kind of getting screwed in many ways, because it's like, all right, we got to wait longer to get our product. Oh, and by the way, we not only have to wait longer, but we actually have to pay more and wait longer. The pandemic has wreaked havoc in all the expected ways on global economy, and of course on printing and shipping and manufacturing that's coming out of the East, and specifically out of China. And even as global economy restriction has gotten better in the past 4 to 6 months, this environment, while better than it was, will continue to be shit. It will be better shit, but it will be shit for quite a long time. And so, in this news story, that this is exactly what they were talking about. Publishers having to talk with customers. Like, I mean, we're seeing this already with Kickstarters who are fulfilling projects right now, going to backers to say, "Hey, shipping costs have gone up, you know, 2,000%. I mean, that's a real number. Since the campaign ended, we need more money from you because this was not at all in the budget. Because how could it have been? Because how could we have projected something like this? A small increase in shipping, a 50% increase in shipping costs, like that sucks. But when you're getting into the hundreds and thousands of percentage increases in shipping, I mean, you're talking about something that's not sustainable any longer. So we're in a weird spot right now, especially if you're kind of like a bigger company that's producing 30,000 units of a game. All of a sudden, your shipping costs just went up by 200 grand, like, and who budgeted for that? No one is the answer. And it's just, I mean, this is going to kill small companies. I mean, some really small companies that are going to do like super, super, super low print runs will be able to survive. But for like that small to mid level company, like this could be a death kiss unless people get really creative and crafty with what they're going to do. Now the problem is those folks who are stuck fulfilling projects, there's no getting around this. Like, you either have the money for it or you don't. Like, you can't make money appear that isn't already there in an account. Like, that's not that's not actually physically possible. So your only other option is, okay, we either don't fulfill, we let our product sit in the printing factory for the next year, and we see if come 12 months time that cost has gone down and we can actually ship then. Or hell, 12 months may come and go and they say, nope, things have gotten worse, or we stayed the same. All right, then how much longer do we wait to just have products sit there on a floor somewhere? Or you go to backers and say, we need more money. But how do you do that? Do you do an opt-in system? Like, all right, we need more money. We're not going to force anyone, but you can opt in to increase your shipping cost to help us out. You can do the opposite and say everyone's opted in. If you want to opt out, you have to tell us within a time frame. But if you don't, then we're going to charge your card a certain amount of money to cover the cost. That comes with sticky, at very least, ethical concerns, but perhaps legal concerns. I don't know. I'm not in that situation, and I don't want to be in that situation. But I understand why people might go that route, even if I don't think I would. But like, we're in a real dilemma here, and I don't think we're going to see any relief until about the 18-month mark from now. I think we'll begin to see things come back down to a baseline in 2023. But for those keeping count, it's 2021. So scary thing to have to deal with right now. Yeah, so this is great too. Companies that are fulfilling multiple projects, especially if they're at the same printer, are combining. They're delaying one project so that they can ship both. They can freight ship both at the same time, and I mean that saves on. I mean, that'll cut your shipping cost in half, which still sucks because you're still paying more than you would have paid otherwise. But hey, instead of paying $300,000 for two projects with a high print run, you might only pay $75,000 for a product with a high print run when you combine shipping like that. So in that regard, that's a win. That'll be a win for a lot of companies, and for smaller companies, and even for LionWing. That there might come a time when that's an option. I think our stuff is spaced out in a way that I think we should be good, especially with the type of product that we're printing right now. I mean, I'm glad that May Night Saga was pushed, because printing that game and then shipping that game right now would be expensive. It's a big, heavy game, heavy in both regards, component wise and sort of mechanics wise. So thankfully, we're not printing that game right now. We're printing books right now. So we lucked out there. But yeah, so this stuff isn't stopping anytime soon. I'm glad that I'm seeing more and more and more articles about this come out so that it can normalize the situation for backers who have a bit of sort of sticker shock, so to speak, when they say, "Hold on a sec, I gotta pay you more money now to ship the game," or "Wait a second, you're gonna hold my product for another year." The more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and there's nothing any of us can do about it. So sometimes normalizing is the best thing we can do. It's the best option. Some other stories here that I saw. I haven't talked about my, if I like superheroes or not, but I do. And there is a new Batman board game coming out, which I normally would not talk about at all. I like superheroes and I like Batman especially, but I typically wouldn't talk about a Batman board game. But I like this one. I think it's called Escape from Arkham Asylum. Kind of role reversal. I like games that kind of throw you a curveball. And so, of course, I would like this where you're playing in the Batman universe. You're breaking out of Arkham Asylum as one of the rogues, one of the villains from Batman's iconic rogues gallery. You're breaking out of Arkham Asylum and you're having to sort of elude Batman. So, like every Batman board game in the history of Batman board games has the players either playing as or cooperating with Batman or a Batman-like figure. So to have this one kind of spin that, tilt the formula on its ear to say, actually, you're not playing or cooperating as or with Batman, you are trying to get away from him, I think is a really cool twist on something that may have felt a little eye-rolling otherwise, just because we have gotten so many Batman games in the past 3 years, that this probably would not have made it splash if it was a little bit more traditional Batman, play as Batman, beat up the Penguin, I'm a little worried because I think, sorry, I'm getting so Night Models, if you're familiar with Night Models, they have the license to produce Harry Potter and DC/Batman miniatures. So they have a whole line. They have a whole like miniatures game based around the Batman universe, the larger DC universe, and then the Harry Potter universe. Despite the fact that they have these big licenses, they're actually a pretty inconsistent publisher. Not my favorite when it comes to folks producing minis for IPs that I think are generally good IPs to make games from or out of. So I'm a little concerned that this game is coming from them. They have, unfortunately, they can sometimes have a sort of like fire and forget approach to game releases. They have a release, they put it out there, and then they don't do a lot with it, which is interesting because they are a miniatures company first and foremost. And so a miniatures game or product line sort of lives and dies by its regular releases. And while they do have regular releases, oftentimes I just feel like there is not like a super deep commitment to their products. That being said, I generally like them, and I certainly like their Batman minis game a lot. Their DC minis game is cool too. It's just like super streamlined and like a very like beer and pretzels kind of game, which isn't always what I'm looking for out of a minis game. But so I'm interested to see what happens there. Speaking of interested to see what happens here, Hero Realms is going digital, which I think is great for a number of reasons. I think the digitization of card games and board games is fantastic. I love a company that does a digital conversion, not adaptation, a digital conversion of their game. And they present it in digital form in the exact way it's presented in physical form. I don't love like board games that suddenly become video games. So I think about like Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven went from board game to video game, and when I play Gloomhaven on Steam, I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm playing the board game anymore. I feel like I'm playing just like a traditional like tactics video game, nothing about that feels very board gamey, even if they are using elements of the board game. It just doesn't resonate with me in the same way as, let's say, Aeon Zen does. Now, Aeon Zen, that digitization is obviously done on a much tighter budget and is nowhere near as robust as the digital adaptation of Gloomhaven. But I like that conversion of Aeon's End more than Gloomhaven. I like the fact that I'm playing with cards. I like the fact that the that you learn to play Aeon's End, the video game, just by like basically pulling up a digital copy of the rule book in the game. At least last time I played, there was no actual like tutorial. It's like read this giant rule book like you'd read if you're playing the game on tabletop. And I love that. I think most people hate it, but I love that kind of thing. So I think by and large, though, Hero Realms going digital is cool. I think more companies right now, especially the larger ones who really depended on convention sales and convention presence and that kind of thing, it makes a lot of sense for them to be exploring the digital space more right now to make ends meet and to continue to be sustainable and profitable. So it wasn't really a surprise that this was happening. I'm sure the planning for this project happened long before the pandemic, but it certainly has hit quite timely. Sin, back Hero Realms Digital, never played it on a table, but something I always wanted to, so I figured this perfect way to do it. Yeah, I like that too. Like those games where you're like, oh yeah, like I want to play that, but I really don't want to commit time to like learning that system and like reading that rule book and fiddling with the components and figuring it all out. So I think something like this is perfect for those types of games that you feel that way about. Now here is something that I feel very strongly about that I'm really excited. So Kill Team is getting a reboot. It wouldn't be a news section if it didn't talk about Warhammer. I think you'll see that going forward. I love me some Warhammer. Kill Team's getting a reboot, thankfully. Kill Team 2.0. And, they're streamlining the game to make it a little bit more Necromunda-like, which I love. I don't think if we turn the clock back 4 years, we would have seen Necromunda as this game that withstood the test of time. But the latest edition of Necromunda has really resonated with people, and I think the Kill Team was like, yo, no one likes our game. We should look to Necromunda for some pointers. And it looks like Kill Team 2.0 is going to incorporate a lot of what Necromunda does. Not everything, and they shouldn't do everything that Necromunda does because that won't fit. But I do like that the team went back to the drawing board and was like, hey, is there some stuff we can borrow from that one game that's kind of like ours that's pretty successful, more successful than ours? Yeah, I saw that there's a new match play missions for Kill Team. Obviously, from the Embryo Machine Kickstarter, I love missions in war games, so getting more of those for Kill Team is cool. The new Kill Team starter set, Aetherius, looks just cool. Oh, it looks good. It looks good. The scenery is good, very, very orcish. Scenery, which I love because the orcs they're a faction that don't get a lot of love when it comes to scenery and just being sort of represented in the larger scheme of like starter sets and that kind of thing. So I love that. And then of course being opposite of the guard. Yeah, I mean, Guard is that faction, that army that also doesn't seem to get a lot of love. A lot of people don't play them, mostly because like it's expensive as hell to be a Guard player, just because you have to field so many damn units. But it's cool that they chose those two factions. Thematically, it makes sense, but it's also cool because you don't see those two factions in a lot of starter sets, and you definitely like never see them in the same starter set. So that right there to me already says like 2.0 of Kill Team is going to be different than 1.0, and that's what that game needs. I also like that, although I like that Kill Team in the past has been sort of a scaled down version of traditional 40K. This seems to be going, scaled down version of 40K, but also not as just a smaller version of 40K, because it is going to be implementing different rules. It is going to be borrowing from Necromunda, I think, in that regard, in terms of how it approaches its rule set. And that's a good thing. It's going to be a little bit more its own thing and less of like a derivative version of 40K that you just play with less units, which, by the way, I love, because I no longer in my life want to commit 6 hours to like a single game of, big point 40K. So I was cool with Kill Team just being a small point 40K, but this going in a different direction and kind of doing its own thing is probably better for the sustainability of the product line and gives people a new way to engage with with miniatures that they haven't. I think, offering, I'm hoping that Kill Team offers special units, special minis that you can't get elsewhere that people will then be able to use or convert over to traditional 40K. So I think that will also make Kill Team 2.0 feel special, is if there's added incentive to give something to the player that they can't get elsewhere. So, Sin Theory 40K in general is something I want to pull the trigger on, but it's so daunting, not even due to price really, but finding time and people to play with. Yeah, so I would add to it. Not only is it daunting for price and time and a place to play, and people to play with, holy shit, that lore is so deep. So I got into Warhammer late in life, I would say. Anyway, I really got into it probably 7 years ago. And at that point I was like, I got in super late and I'm like, oh my, where do I even start? There's not even like a collected lore book that I could just go to and like read the highlights. Like, oh no, I got to go through like old editions of like source material, of like army books, of faction books. And I got to read that faction book just to figure out what happened at this one point in the timeline, and that was 6 editions ago. So it's like super, like, whatever the opposite of newcomer friendly is, that is what 40K is. That's, to me, what makes it daunting. Yes, all the other stuff is daunting as well, and it's so time consuming, just painting models and putting them together. If you're not even into painting, it still takes time to put them together. But it's just like, to like learn about my faction, I got to do all this research. It's like a part-time job just to enjoy 40K or Sigmar or any, for that matter, any GW line outside of Lord of the Rings. I mean, Lord of the Rings is Lord of the Rings. The lore is already out there and has been out there for a long time, and there's easy ways to get into that lore. So honestly, I typically tell people, if they're like, hey, I want to play a Games Workshop game, I'm thinking about 40K. I'm like, you know what? You should not play 40K. You should not play Sigmar. You should not play Warhammer Fantasy. You should either play a boxed game that GW puts out, be it Warcry or Adeptus Titanicus or something like that, or Necromunda, or if you want to do like the actual like true wargaming experience, start with Lord of the Rings battle strategy game, or strategy battle game. That's the one you should start with. It's less overwhelming. The armies are a lot smaller. It's more affordable. The models are easier to paint. It's a setting that you probably are already familiar with. You probably already have some working knowledge of the Tolkien universe. Start there. Don't start with 40K. That's overwhelming. No one listens to me though. They're like, no, if I'm playing a GW game, I want to play Space Marines. I want to play like Power Rangers in space. And I'm like, okay, well, have fun. And then in 6 months, I'll talk to you when you no longer are playing. Let's see here. Whatever terrain GW can festoon with skulls is what I love the most. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Although I'm not a Khorne player. I hate. I guess it's not 40K exactly, though I guess there are plenty of 40K factions that are skull themed. But when I think of skulls, I immediately think of Sigmar and I think of Khorne. My old roommate keeps trying to get me to play, even just on TTS, but even reading the rules and figuring out what the models to use and whatever is too much for me. So I mean, really, the rules are, if you just like look at it all on surface level, you're like, holy shit, like this is going to take forever. But when you start reading the rules are actually like very simple. And I'm not just saying that as someone who's played for now 7 years and like, so the rules are simple to me. No, I mean like the rules are actually simple. You've got modifiers per units, and so you need to learn your units. And slowly you'll want to learn like enemy factions or armies that you don't play, so that when someone's rolling something, they're not cheesing you or like screwing you over. But just the rules, I think it's very straightforward stuff, and it's always well written. Let's see here. Cynthia, I was thinking of picking up the Age of Sigmar Extremist starter set when it comes out and try and gauge interest among friends. I think that's probably a fine idea. I mean, again, that's a commitment. I would actually say if you want to get into Sigmar, and I promote the Mortal Realms. I love Sigmar. It had a rocky start. I think a lot of people have come around on it though. I actually prefer Sigmar to 40K, the 40K universe. I think the Mortal Realms is just more interesting. And I love I love the I just love the armies of Sigmar. I would actually say you should start with Warcry. I think that is a way better place to start than 40 than the Extremist starter set. Warcry, small models, played on a small area. Games are over in 45 minutes. Streamlined rules. Buy-ins cheap. Lots of stuff though if you want to like really get into it. Still has a nice supported scene, or at least a community around it that really loves that game. It came out and I think people were like, this is what Kill Team should have been. They did a really nice job with Warcry. So I'd actually say start there. But if you're like dead set on, no, I need like Mortal Realms proper. Okay, yeah, then I think the Extremist starter set is as good a spot as any to start. Light Alice. This is the same reason I really dislike IP-based board games, because for me, it's usually a requirement to go consume the source, and sometimes that can be a 50-hour video game or a long TV. So yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you there. Having to read about the game just to begin to learn to play the game, to eventually play the game, is not my ideal way of spending my time these days. I started reading comics after buying the Marvel LCG. Yeah, I mean, sometimes people jump in first, realize like, I really love this universe. I'm going to go consume whatever I can for this. A great place to start with Warhammer lore. Well, the best place to start is actually just like pick your faction, find the faction that resonates with you, even if it's just how they look. Get their faction book, read that thing from cover to cover. The faction books have some of the best lore. The rule books, like the core rule books, have amazing lore, and will get you mostly caught up to where things are, and then kind of like what's going on right then and there in the universe. So those are a great place to start. But if you're like, you know what, that's still too much for me, I'm thinking about 40K, but Marvel has a fantastic 40K series going on right now. That's really great. Also, if you want to kind of like dip your toes, Warhammer Plus, their subscription service is coming out next month, and they're going to have a couple shows. It's a great way to get introduced to the lore as well. Or if you ever want to like really get into the lore, just like hit me up with your preferred universe, and I will give you like the books that I think you should start with. That way you don't waste your time trying to like find a book, or waste your time reading a shitty book and then getting turned off from the universe because it was a bad book. I'll hook you up. Let's see here. Okay, y'all are just talking about. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, now Power Rangers, playing that deck builder or playing any Power Rangers board game, like that is definitely one of those universes where like if you don't like the IP, just don't play the game. Like Power Rangers is a thing. It's a whole thing, right? And it is definitely not for everyone. Definitely not for everyone. So I can totally understand like not being into that IP and therefore not wanting to learn that game. Oh, lastly, speaking of starter sets for 40K, that Hexfire 40K starter set that's coming out is gonna be gnarly. I mean, talk about factions that are not often represented, especially against one another. Grey Knights and Thousand Suns. I love seeing some Grey Knights love. Grey Knights, I don't feel like Grey Knights have gotten any love since 7th edition. Like they were trash in 8th edition. I mean, just completely competitively unviable, and haven't been super loved on in 9th either. So to see them getting a refresher and a revamp, and to see them featured on a big box like that people are going to buy and are therefore maybe going to play them for the first time or check them out or read about their lore is super cool, because I think Grey Knight lore is very awesome. I mean, really, that's the funny thing about 40K. I think people like painting the miniatures and learning about the lore more than they actually like playing the game. In fact, I feel like I recently, like in the past year or so, read some statistics that Games Workshop put out. showing kind of like the percentage breakdown. Actually, it was not Games Workshop. It was someplace else that ran some kind of survey and kind of showed the breakdown of their player base or their reader base at that point of like, if you're into 40K, like what's the thing that like you do the most in the hobby? Do you paint? Do you lore read? Or do you play the game? And like playing the game was the last. Like it came in third out of the three categories. Like everyone else was either painting or reading about the lore. So even if you don't want to, play the game, there's more to do in that universe. Sound frank. I hate 40K, but love Kill Team. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for 2.0 for sure. I like proper 40K, so I'm not in the exact same boat, Frank, but I certainly understand being of that mindset. There are a bunch of 40K video games that would be good introductions to the universe, like Dawn of War 2. Holy shit, I love Dawn of War 2. I have such great memories of Dawn of War 2. I was in grad school when that came out. Oh my gosh, I skipped so many classes to play Dawn of War 2. There was this huge fucking snowstorm that came through one night. Our classes were canceled for the next day because the snowstorm was so bad. I played Dawn of War 2 literally all night long until 5 in the morning. Finally fell asleep around like 6. I have such strong memories of Dawn of War 2. I like OG Dawn of War as well. Dawn of War 3 was a game. It was a game. But Dawn of War 2, that shift to that squad level tactics gameplay away from like kind of a more macro RTS approach of OG Dawn of War was really cool. I liked it. Frank, I would pay 40K, but it takes so long. Yeah, I don't know if you did. I don't know if you heard what I was saying before, Frank, but I'm on the same way. Like not only do I not have 5 to 6 hours to commit to, a game of 40K. Like, not only do I not have that, even if I did, I'm not. I'm not doing that at this point in my life. I'm not killing my entire Sunday to go play one game of 40K at my local shop. Like, I'm not there anymore. That's a young person's game. Or a really old person's game. But it's not a game that someone with kids can keep up with or would want to keep up with, even if they could. Sigh. Heck, I recently went to the Pokemon TCG subreddit. 99% of the posts were about pools. Nobody seems to play that game. It's so true. It's so true. I don't know that scene super well anymore, but that feels about right. What I do know and what I used to know from playing that game more. Also, when you're losing, it hurts. You sit for a few hours and all your shit just disappears. Yeah, see, when I'm playing 40K or Kill Team, like, I don't know, because I do treat it as just like a way to just like flex a different part of my brain. I actually don't care if I'm winning or losing, which is interesting because I'm a fairly competitive person, so I don't like losing in games. But 40K, really any war game, I don't mind if I'm losing. I don't know. It's like I start the game and like something like a switch gets flipped in my brain and I'm like, oh, I'm cool. Like, even if I lose, like I'm totally chill right now. But if like you put me in front of a competitive card game or a board game and I'm losing, I'm not so chill. I'm getting pissed. But yeah, something with war games, I'm like, all right, let's hang out, let's play, let me drink a bunch of beer. Cause that's mostly what I want to do. Like, if I could just play like Necromunda, or Warcry, or even like Small Point Sigmar and just like drink beer all afternoon, like, I'm set. Like, that's that I'm cool with. That's probably a better Saturday night event than an all day event at this point. But so yeah, I don't mind if I'm losing. Though, the buffer might be the beer. I might not care because I'm always drinking beer when I play Warhammer. Anyway, okay, so we're coming up on the 2 hour and 30-minute mark. It's time to call it quits. I think introducing a new segment it definitely has made the show longer, and I don't know if it was a good idea, folks. I'm not sure it was a good idea at all. I think mistakes may have been made. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Those who were here from the beginning to the end, there's still a lot of you here, so hopefully you enjoyed the show. Sai in the chat says a war game is just a TTRPG with rulers. At least I assume so. Never played either one. I'd say that's not true. I'd say that's not true at all, actually. But hey, if you want to see those two genres as that, who am I to stop you? But yeah, so thanks everyone for sticking with me for the last 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 42 seconds and counting. Covered a lot of ground. Really excited about what we got planned for Picaresque. You'll get more details about that. And of course, for the other games, we'll be supporting those with some more tournaments and events and TTS stuff. Uh, it's an exciting time to be a part of the LionWing family, and I'm really excited to show off the Picaresque campaign page and to get that baby rolling. So, unfortunately, you'll be hearing a lot about that game, perhaps ad nauseum, because not only is it the next project, of course, but I am just super stoked. So, anyway, did we do some talk about upcoming LionWing? Oh, no, we didn't. See, that's what happens when I've been talking for 2.5 hours. I forget to make good on the promises I made 2.5 hours prior. So, upcoming content and shows. I did sort of talk about this and interspersed it with other segments. I need to talk to Noelle. Is Noelle still in the chat? She was probably like, I'm getting out of here. Y'all are talking about Warhammer. I don't give a shit. I want to bring Noelle on, talk about the localization of Picaresque. I want to bring on Winona. I want to just bring on guests. Not every week, but it will be a segment that's in the show more regularly. It might be once a month. It might be once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. But I do want to have sort of a rotating guest spot. They'll be on for the whole show. It won't just be like interviewing them or just talking about one project. Now, it might be that way initially with Winona and Noelle because we've got very specific things to talk about and ground that I want to cover. But in general, a guest host from the beginning, I think, is the direction that I want to go with LionWing Talks. It will require more of a free-form show. We'll still give updates and that kind of thing, but that is in the cards in addition to our more focused guest shows where we're talking about a project. I did this with episode 2.5 of this series when I brought on Tyler to talk about Embryo Machine. That'll continue to happen going forward. So new content in that regard, interviews and the like, but also guest hosts. I wouldn't mind bringing on folks that have nothing to do with LionWing. Now that could be one of y'all. Yeah, if you want to come on, you want to talk, shoot the shit about whatever. But it also might be folks from other companies, inside the industry, but from other companies, what they're doing, their take on tabletop gaming news, that kind of thing. It might be content creators, that kind of stuff as well. So we'll be adding. I guess the point is we're going to be adding another social and personality element to the show where it won't always just be me any longer. So I know y'all can cry and get your tears out now, but I think that'll be fun. And while it won't happen every week, it will be a nice change of pace, I think. I mean, I guess I could just continue doing this in the format that we've been doing it, for eternity, but I do want to shift things up, and that's how I'm going to do it. In addition to incorporating the news and also talking about, which I didn't get a chance to tonight, some Japanese stuff. Usually grabbing one Japanese project that I'm keeping an eye on. Tonight I wanted to talk about Hizuru, which is up on Kickstarter right now, which they're doing something really interesting with the game. They're sort of building the campaign in the game to a degree in real time as the campaign is live. So very, very experimental thing. That's the kind of thing that I love seeing on Kickstarter, especially when it's like a designer on Kickstarter for their game. I think that's really cool. I think it's an interesting approach. It seems to be working for them. I think they've been live for 3 days. They're up to 15K. The game looks cool. Hizuru. So check that out. And yes, I do want to talk about more Japanese products as well, at least identifying one game to discuss. I should also say, if you're into supporting projects and you have a way around the system so that you can support a product and then get said product from Campfire, the Japanese crowdfunding site. The latest edition, the latest release of Hagme is on Campfire right now. I've talked about how I like Hagme, how it's one of my favorite Japanese competitive card games right now, and has been for a number of years. Hagme is doing some really cool stuff. It always has. That is a game worth checking out. The latest addition to the game is on Campfire. It is disappointingly performing less than all of its predecessors have. So Hagme has mostly been a game that's always been funded through Campfire campaigns, and all of the campaigns have succeeded. This one is slow. I mean, I think there are only like 2.5 days, maybe 2 days left on that campaign. And last I looked, they were like at 30% of their funding goal. And that's typically not where Hagme is by the time that, they're at the 2-day mark, being 2 days out. Normally they're either funded or they're super close to being funded. So to see this one starting slow, is a little disappointing. I think there's probably reason for that. One is they did just launch a Campfire campaign like 4 or 5 months ago for Hagme Tactics, so it might be a little too soon. Maybe people are feeling the burnout of Hagme. And it also could be that they don't do a super great job of what this new edition is actually bringing to the game. It's hard to get a good grasp and sense of what it is you're backing with this project. So I think maybe a combination of those things is creating a slower project for them, a slower crowdfund campaign for them. I hope they're able to pull a rabbit out of the hat here and get this thing funded, because I think Hagme is the type of game that deserves to be funded, because it's a lot of fun. They've even got a super, super cool deck constructing based PvE mode where you're taking on bosses. It's actually quite a complex cooperative offshoot of the main competitive card game, but it's extremely good. Extremely good. I mean, it's got that Marvel Champions kind of vibe to it. You're building your deck and then you're squaring off with your deck and friends against huge bosses who have their own decks of cards and minions. It's super great. So historically, the series has done really well for itself, which is all the more shocking that, this one isn't performing up to expectations, or at least up to the expectations that its predecessor set. Anyway, so going to be working on that as well. Yes, Hizuru does have an English tier. Give that a look. It's a pretty affordable game. So those are the segments. That's the content you can look forward to. And now I really am at the 2 hour, 26 minute mark, which means we're basically at 2.5 hours. I've talked too long. I'm talked out. So I'm leaving, folks. It's been fun. Loved hanging out with y'all. Love the chatter in the room. Thanks for joining us live. Y'all are the absolute best. I'll see you in the Discord, and get ready for some more picaresque shilling. See ya.